Hi there, this is Laura Dovalo from the blog Bagatelas de Papel. Since I showed you my triple interactive card back in September, I've gotten a couple of requests for a tutorial of just the rotating pull tab mechanism. As you can see, when the tab is pulled, the T-Rex opens its mouth, revealing a cute present. There's a link to the original Martha Stewart mechanical dog card tutorial in the description box, but here's my version using My Favorite Things products. I chose the T-Rex from the Your Roarsome set because his mouth was big enough to play with, but the horned dinosaur would also look great just nodding or moving its tail. My intention was to use the word pull from the interactive label set, but I finally ended up using an enamel triangle instead. I started by stamping two of the dinos with some Copic-friendly ink on white cardstock and roughly fussy cutting them. I also cut two pieces of heavyweight blue cardstock, about 5.5 by 4.25 inches, a bit larger than the faux stitched rectangle die from the Blueprints 15 set, which measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. Measurements are not super important in this tutorial, so choose whatever products you have. The 1/2 inch circle die is from the Blueprints 28 set, but it doesn't have to be perfect, so you can use a craft knife to cut it out. I've attached the rectangle die to the blue cardstock with some micropore tape, and now I'm trying to figure out where to place the circle die. It has to go behind the dino's head, so that the mechanism can work. Okay, I've die cut both my front panel and the backing, and now we can move on to the mechanism itself. I had to take advantage of the smaller Band-Aid die, which was almost the perfect match for the piece used in the Martha Stewart card, but of course you could just cut out a rectangle shape and round the corners. I die cut it 4 times out of heavyweight craft cardstock and glued 2 and 2 together with some glossy accents. Next, I just punched 2 holes in each of the 2 pieces and used a nail file to smoothen the edges of the holes. I then used a tiny brad to link the 2 pieces together and inserted a second brad to link the articulated piece to the back panel. But first I had to punch a hole using the front panel as a guide. Okay, that's done. Now let's work on the front panel some more. Here I'm using a T-ruler to find the center of the edge of the panel so that I can punch a semicircle with my Fiskars 1-inch punch and be able to access the slider panel. Now I can carefully erase the pencil marks and move on to the next step. I'm putting a layer of foam adhesive around the back panel using the faux stitching as a guide to make it as straight as possible. You can get away with only 1 layer, but it would be better to use 2. Here I'm measuring the width of the slider panel, which turned out to be a little less than 3 inches. But of course it depends on the size of your card panel. Some of you might have noticed that I flipped the brad. Sometimes it can make a difference, but not in this card. Just leave it as it was. We don't want the slider panel to slide underneath the flange, so I'm just going to attach a piece of foam adhesive to act as a stop before I continue. Now we can use a pencil and the hole of the second Band-Aid to mark the slider panel, more or less in the middle. After punching the hole in the slider panel, we can attach it to the Band-Aid, and now our mechanism is ready. Let's see if it's working correctly. So far so good. It's time to cut the slider panel, and we can do so easily without having to separate it. Mine ended up being 3 1/8 of an inch long. If you want to stamp a sentiment on a slider panel, now would be the perfect time. You could even detach the brad to make it easier. I usually don't include any coloring in my video tutorials, but I managed to keep it to under a minute and just wanted to show you that it was important to color both the dino's head and body at the same time in order for them to match perfectly. I used 4 different greens, G14, G40, G43 and G94, and 2 yellows, the very pale fluorite yellow and Y04. I didn't do any fancy coloring with scales or intricate details this time, although the image is large enough for it. I had already started fussy cutting the body of one of the T-Rexes when I remembered the score tape. I usually use stick-it adhesive for this, but score tape is almost as easy to cut. A quick tip: it's better to move the paper and not the scissors when you're fussy cutting to get a perfect result. I wanted to make sure that I didn't cut off too much of the head, so I temporarily attached the dino to the card panel with some washi tape and used the hole to trace a curved line to the back of the dino with a permanent marker. Everything was looking good, so I could finally decorate the main panel. I cut a semicircle out of some masking paper and inked the panel with peeled paint distress ink. To create a more festive scene, I used stamps from the Birthday Bears and Happy Hippos sets, and some patterned papers from the Sweet Celebration pack. I also stamped the sentiment on a banner cut with one of the dies from the Blueprints 28 set. I like to trace the outline of a fussy cut image with a black marker. In order to do this well, I peeled off the backing of the score tape first. I had a hard time fitting the present inside the dino's mouth in my triple interactive card, so this time I did it before gluing it down, and it was a whole lot easier. I just snipped off a corner here and a sliver there to adapt it to the T-Rex's face. And now I was finally ready to glue the dino in its place. The following step was to peel off the backing of the foam adhesive and to attach the main panel to the back panel. Carefully starting in one corner and trying to do it as straight as possible. Next, I cut a thin strip of foam adhesive and glued it around the brad. It's easier to make it curve if you peel off the backing beforehand. I used a pair of scissors to press it against the flange, but it still was kinda difficult to do. I finally got it to stick and could attach the dino's head in its place, completing this pull-tab slider card with a rotating mechanism. So here's the finished card panel with the before-mentioned embellishments and some clouds from a retired set by My Favorite Things. As a finishing touch, I added a shadow with a grey marker under the T-Rex. I used a piece of heavyweight white cardstock for the card base, and that's it. I hope you found this tutorial easy to follow. Please leave any questions in the comments and feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time.